Uh, Where is our... Yeah, they were all set.
Sliding seats?
No, but, why does she such a great idea?
Yeah, more people.
But it's not here, probably.
Okay, we're good. Yeah. I'm just letting them sit, letting them get settled. Okay, we'll go.
Yeah, hello.
Good evening, everyone. I think we'll go ahead and get started. If people can take their seats, we'll move ahead and start. Well, let me welcome everyone tonight. I am Richard Giles, 36 Spring Road, Chairman of the Concord Finance Committee, and would like to welcome everyone to the second of the 3 Finance Committee hearings. We were here Monday night. We will be here again at the end of the month. And just a comment on the purpose, but more importantly, to encourage participation from everyone here and from people at home watching. We have the ability to email questions in, please, at public-hearings@concordma.gov. Please include your name and address as well, and we have a way to funnel those questions up to the front of the room, and we will make sure they get asked as well. This is the beginning or the middle part of a budget process that started for us in September, sort of concluded the first go-through with all the entities by the end of November, and now we have public hearings and we'll conclude town meeting in early April. We have a number of goals that we look at every year as we embark on this process. We are very pleased this year that we will be able to maintain an overall budget below 4%. It's a guideline. It's not a strict rule, but it's one that we look at as we look at the different entities and options each year. We also look at a variety of items that we think help provide the town with flexibility. We're certainly cognizant of our bond rating, but also look at our free cash position. I think that is a very important indication, as well as our unused levy capacity, as to the financial flexibility that the town maintains. And you'll probably see that as we go through and talk about the different articles. We look at the trends in the 3 main entities, which we heard from one on Monday night from the town. We'll hear from both the public schools and the high school tonight. One of the things, again, looking at the trends and how the increases came in, we are happy that this year we have agreement for budgets that have a smaller percentage increase than it has had for each of the entities for the last couple of years. Every 2 years, there is a citizen satisfaction survey, and again, I think probably no surprise to anybody in the room here, schools are the highest priority within the town, and we're certainly cognizant of that fact as well. The balancing that we look, and we're certainly aware, and we actually heard an article again on Monday night, of the impact to existing taxpayers and the burden that is continually placed on them. We tend to look at things over a 3 to 5 year period. Things get smoothed out a little bit more in that time frame. But again, as we look at this year's budget, at least in anticipation, would have just under a 3% increase for existing taxpayers. And again, that's certainly something that we pay significant attention to as we monitor the increase that we've seen both in the real estate values, but also in the single-family tax bill, and that's certainly something that we are very aware of as we go through the process. And with that, I would encourage participation, encourage feedback. I would encourage feedback to all the different parties that present, but also to us as well, either by email or in whatever form you would like to do that. So with that, we will move forward. And I think we will begin with Superintendent Rigby on the public school budget.
Good evening. I'm Diana Rigby, School Superintendent, and I'm here tonight with John Flaherty, our Deputy Superintendent. We're going to discuss the 2017 proposed school budgets and the warrant articles for Concord Public School and Concord Carlisle Regional School District. Also here tonight are our school committee members, our Chair Wally Johnson. Sitting next to Wally is our Chair of the Regional Committee, Joanna Boynton, and we have also our member, Dan Conti. In the back is Louis Salemi, who's our Vice Chair of the Building Committee. Thank you for being here tonight. The 5 schools of our combined districts have continued to provide high-quality educational experiences for our students as they prepare for their successful futures. The district's performance report of spring 2016 will be published and distributed next month, and it highlights the accomplishments and challenges of the past school year. We begin tonight by expressing our gratitude to the towns of Concord and Carlisle and its citizens for their significant investment in our schools, continuing the tradition of support for the high-quality education for which Concord and Carlisle have been known. The budget information that we're presenting tonight with supporting detail is published in our budget books. You'll want to make sure that you have the CPS budget book as well as CCRSD budget book. So there's 2 budget books, as well as the handouts of the PowerPoint. The budget books are also posted on our website. For this year, we are requesting a level service budget at $35,660,111. That represents a 3.23% increase from the current year's budget, and it's well below last year's request. This request matches the FinCom guidelines. Our budgets are developed to support our mission and to provide resources for programs, services, and activities that reflect these core values. All of our district efforts focus on improving student learning, and our students achieve at very high levels in academics, in the arts, in athletic areas, and musical areas. We're also proud that our students are committed to social responsibility, and they serve others by participating in numerous community service programs. We're also proud to announce that Thoreau and Alcott are 2 of only 240 schools this year out of 1,154 elementary schools in Massachusetts to attain a Level 1 designation from the Department of Education, and that's due to their excellent work in narrowing the achievement gap. We begin the budget process with an articulation of core budgeting principles. All the work of the districts places students and their learning at the center of decisions, and all of our budget decisions revolve around building the futures of our students, one student at a time. We also recognize the cost drivers, and we strive for sustainability in our programs and services. Students and their achievement and growth are at the core of our decisions, and so throughout the budget process, we ask the question, how does this practice increase student learning? And we meet the 21st century learning needs of students by providing rigorous and progressive learning programs that will equip students with knowledge, skills, and attitudes needed for college and career readiness. We have made steady progress in using current technology and digital tools to enrich student learning. This chart represents our enrollment, and although we've had a reduction in kindergarten enrollment last year, our schools have increased enrollment by 12.6% since 2011. Our current enrollment is 2,100 students, and that is an increase of 7 students from last year. Our NESDEC projections show that we will have a stable K-8 enrollment with a range from 2,100 to 2,130 students for the next 10 years. Our budget requests have met the Concord FinCom guidelines in the past 10 of the 11 years, and we have not required or requested an override for the past 10 years. One of the major cost drivers of our budget is salaries. 80% of our budget is allocated to the salaries of our 446 employees. Teacher salaries account for 52% of the budget, and our other employees account for 28% of the budget. Our budgeting process begins with analysis of our contractual and fixed costs. This slide shows the cost obligations with the annual percentage increases as part of the total budget. These fiscal year 2017 costs account for required 4.47% increase to sustain our current programs at operating level. However, we are able to offset these required cost increase with reductions in special education and also in the sick leave buyback that will reduce the overall growth from 4.47% to 3.23% increase. This percentage increase equates to a required $1.1 million increase in fiscal year 2017 to sustain our current programs. So this slide breaks down the 4.47%, or the $1,545,675 increase due to contractual and fixed costs. We negotiate salaries with 5 collective bargaining units and other non-union employees. The largest unit is Concord Teachers Association, with a median salary of more than $90,000. We also have obligations for safety and transportation. Note that our fiscal year 2017 contractual and fixed increases are 4.47%, or approximately $1.54 million. But this year, we're able to reduce special education by $359,240, and we're able to reduce the contractual sick leave buyback obligation by $69,059. So this $428,290 reduction allows us to bring the requested budget in below the 4.47% level to a more modest and sustainable increase of 3.23%. During the budget process, we review our budget increase history, and this graph shows the budget growth percentages since fiscal year 2008. So the red horizontal line shows the fixed and contractual increases of 4.47% for fiscal year 2017. Note that during the 4-year period from 2008 to 2012, the budget increases were significantly lower than the fixed cost growth, and in fiscal year 2016, significantly higher. However, neither scenario is sustainable on a long-term basis. Our budget increase of 3.23% for fiscal year 2017 is aligned with a moderate 3.22% average increase experienced through fiscal year 2010 through fiscal year 2015. We show this slide to illustrate our efforts in requesting responsible budget increases while being responsive to taxpayers' demands. The red line shows a constant rate of a 3.39% increase in the past 8 years. And we are requesting a budget increase of 3.23% or slightly lower than our long-term rate. The blue line indicates the budget increase path we have taken since 2008. Note that in fiscal year 2017, the 3.23% increase is still below the fiscal year 2017 fixed cost growth of 4.47%. The gap between the red and blue lines indicates those additional funds were not requested from taxpayers during those years. These low, unsustainable increases were only possible due to significant reductions in supplies and materials, due to the teacher unions negotiating low-scale increases during the economic downturn, and reducing other costs when possible, and closely and prudently managing our budgets. This slide provides an overview of the major budget areas and the respective increases. And we appreciate the support for the CPS school budget.
Thank you. Let's start off with a question. I know last year buses were an item that got placed back in, and we were playing catch up with ordering new buses. And I guess my first comment is to compliment you for putting them back into the regular
Operating
budget,
budget.
which is where they ought to be. Where are we now? Now that we went through 1 year of catch up, and I see 2 additional buses now, how do we feel about the fleet and sort of where we stand?
Okay, so I'm going to ask John. He's the expert bus man. John's going to tell you exactly the numbers.
So we currently have 6 CPS buses on order and 4 regional buses on order. We have not taken delivery of those. We anticipated delivery in mid-December, but we are working with the vendor and the factory to get those buses into the district. We've worked out an interim plan where they've provided some rentals at no cost to us, 3 school buses, to sort of alleviate our short-term crises with getting buses on the road and inspections and so forth. So we're keeping everything moving, but we're looking forward to the delivery of those 10 buses.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Linda Miller, Finance Committee. You pointed out quite dramatically that teacher salaries comprise about 52% of the overall CPS budget. You're currently in negotiations with the Concord Teachers Association to renew a 3-year contract. Could you describe the most recent proposal with regard to teacher salaries and benefits that has been made to the CTA? And could you indicate whether that is what is presented in the budget that you've presented that to us, or could there be additional revenues required or increased expenses based on a change in the teacher's contract, and how would that affect this budget that's been presented?
Sure. So while we were preparing the budget, we knew that we were going to be moving into negotiations, and so we considered that in developing the FY17 budget. And so we are confident that what we have put on the table is part of the budget that we're offering. However, you give some and you get some, and so if that's not what is the end result, then we make some decisions about how to manage the budget moving forward.
Thank you.
Hi, it's Wendy Ravelli, the Finance Committee. Diana, I saw that there was a good reduction in special ed, and was that because kids are matriculating up to the high school? And partly related to that is each year it's a little unpredictable, and you watch those early kids coming in. Is there risk that we've got new kids with new demands such that this budget is still going to be tight, and can you accommodate those unexpected kids who might have needs?
Yes, with regards to special ed, you know, it does fluctuate quite a bit, but we really research the trends and the patterns. We watch them very carefully. Right now, we're in a position where, for the past few years, our special ed students have moved to the high school district, and we've not had the comparable number entering the elementary. However, we're noticing that our integrated preschool is increasing significantly at this point, at the 3- and 4-year level. So we are anticipating that this trend may not continue. So where we can for this year and next year, we can make those reductions. We take those reductions, but we can't commit that those reductions will continue to be able to do that.
Thank you.
But we do look at 3- to 5-year trends. That's what we're watching carefully to manage that.
Okay.
Diana, you mentioned various elements important for student learning, and there have been a number of initiatives, some of which, such as the Closing the Achievement Gap, seem to be paying off very handsomely in terms of the award of Level 1 to 2 of the elementary schools. Could you discuss other items that might be contributors to student learning and how they're reflected in the budget? And just mentioning a couple, one would be that enrichment program that has been added at the elementary level and whether that will continue or be expanded vis-a-vis this budget. Other programs you've talked about, such as foreign language learning at the elementary level, would be interesting as well, and other structural changes such as the issue of start time and where that stands.
Sure. So let me start by saying it is because the communities are willing to support academic excellence and to provide the support to have the very best teachers in the classrooms. That's what's making the difference, is that we have highly talented teachers that are instructing students, and they are providing personalized learning, so they're focusing on each and every student and those students' needs. In addition, we have, for the last few years, we have implemented a system that is monitoring carefully students' progress in terms of mastering their content and skills. And so we evaluate our students every 6 weeks in terms of their reading and math skills. And then as grade levels, we meet in our progress meetings, and we use our curriculum specialists that the community is willing to support to help the teachers analyze that assessment data to identify strengths and weaknesses for students. And then the next step is we provide targeted instruction in the curricular areas of which students need specialized help or more opportunity to practice in a different way. And that process is all involved at the school site and is really dependent on the skill level of teachers. So our budgets support high-quality teaching, they support professional development, and so our teachers are able to use the assessment system in the best way to identify individual needs for students. In terms of enrichment programs, we're also very proud that for high-need students, a group of our students are minority students. We receive a state grant for METCO. We use that state grant money to provide an enrichment program for our early kindergarten and first grade students from Boston in partnership with the Umbrella. So while they're receiving instruction at our schools in the morning, in our classrooms in kindergarten, in the afternoon, their afternoon programs are at the Umbrella, where they have experiences in STEM projects, so science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. So that's proved to be highly effective for our students as they move on to first and second grade. They're maintaining their skills. So that's exciting. The one program that is not part of our budget that going forward, we're still in discussion with our school sites, is the Spanish language program. We've had a committee, a very active committee in the past year, research language programs at the elementary level, and it was recommended to the school committee that we consider implementing a Spanish language program, K-5. However, that's a budget item, and that does not fit within our budget parameters for FY17. But moving forward in the next few years, I'm hoping that that is a consideration, because we feel strongly that our students should have experiences in a different language early on in their educational career.
Thank you.
Diana, Pat Nelson, Finance Committee. Could
Could you speak to any other programmatic additions or augmentations that you're not able to accommodate in this budget that you would like to see accommodated going forward?
Sure. Currently, we have a K-12 science committee that is reviewing and discussing the new science standards, and they are developing new units around interdisciplinary science activities that incorporate the engineering and art. And so as we move forward with those units, that is going to require an increased amount of materials, professional development for teachers, and opportunities for students to engage in experiences in innovation labs and working with challenges, discovery challenges. That's going to require a significant investment on the part of the district. In terms of math, we are the the K-5 elementary math committee comprised of teachers is making a recommendation to adopt a new math program. Now that is in this year's budget and will continue for next year, but as we move forward, I can see that we will then begin to we're looking at science, and then we're going to be moving into health, and then we'll be reviewing math and science at the secondary level. So as we continue with the curriculum reviews and the recommendations from the teacher groups doing those reviews, that's going to require more new materials and more professional development.
Phil Swain, Finance Committee. So I have a question about legal services. And I don't know, I might be reading this wrong, but this is page 84. It lists the legal services budget. I'm just reading across on the line. 30,000 for fiscal year 15, and the actuals for fiscal year 15 were 0. And the budget for fiscal year 16 was 30,000. I'm just questioning, was it actually 0?
Yeah. I think, are you looking at the legal settlements?
No, legal services.
Well, legal services, 40,000, 35,000,
I'm sorry. Okay. All right, I guess I was reading wrong.
Yeah, the print is small. Yeah.
All right, still, it was only 35,000 in fiscal year 15?
Yes.
Right? Are you still using the same law firm, Ropes and Gray?
Yeah. We use about 3 or 4 law firms, depending on what the cases are involved in.
Do you know the hourly rates for those law firms?
I'm sorry?
Do you know the hourly rates for those law firms?
Oh, it varies across the firms.
Well, what's the top hourly rate, do you know?
I don't know.
It's close
John
to
might know.
It's close to $900 an hour for a senior member of the Ropes and Gray staff, which is probably what you're inquiring about.
It's only $900 an hour for Ropes and Gray? Out of curiosity?
I may be off a few dollars, but it's in that area.
Okay. And it was only, the legal services for CPS in fiscal year 15 was only $35,000?
Yes, that's correct.
I commend you.
Thank you.
When there are settlements that could be disclosed publicly, they would appear in that line. Most settlements by nature are confidential.
Right. But there were none in
It's
last
basically
year?
it's basically an allowance for settlements that may occur, but we would not record the actuals in that actual line item.
But there were none last year, and you budget for it every year in case there are some?
No settlements that hit the operating budget. Sometimes we also provided legal services through insurance companies, and occasionally there are settlements there that are not charged to the operating budget. They're paid for by the insurance companies.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions either from the committee or from the audience? If you have a question, please step to the microphone and identify yourself.
Ann Hayden, 342 Sudbury Road. I was interested in your comment about the integrated preschool and that it looks like you're seeing more students coming in, nursery school students with SPED. And I'm wondering if that continues over a couple of years, could that mean that the integrated preschool in effect becomes 100% SPED students? I was under the impression that the goal was to have a 50-50 so that it was regular education and SPED students. So I'm wondering what the ratio is this year, if you are starting to see that increase, and if you think that's going to, if it's going in that direction.
Sure. So it'll always be an integrated preschool with special ed and community peers, because that's our core value. Currently, we have 31 special ed students and 32 community peers. But as the slots, you know, as the children turn 3, which they don't just turn 3 in August and they're ready for September, that we have to be ready. So next week, we have 10 new students that we need to serve that have turned 3.
And does that mean those 10 students are SPED students, so that, because you said the number was bigger, so that's how they're coming in?
So then it will be 41 SPED students, and we'll provide more staff, which we can at this point. The space can allow that. But what we're watching very carefully is the space will not allow an increase of 16 and 20 more special ed students and the same number of regular ed students that we're serving. So we are anticipating that moving into next year, at this time, we'll be discussing space for integrated preschool.
At Ripley?
Well, I just want to say we'll be discussing space for the integrated preschool, and we can assume it's at Ripley, but yes, we will be discussing space. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
May I add something?
Yes.
And I would just add also that we have a legal requirement to provide those special education services. So in the face of choosing over regular ed students in that environment, we will have to provide space for the special education students.
Oh, hi. My name's Leanne Kay, 262 Virginia Road. I have 2 questions to ask. One is a question I'd like to ask personally, and then another question I'd like to present on behalf of a citizen who couldn't be here this evening. Could you tell me how much money from the K-8 budget is used to support the METCO program?
Not off the top of my head, but I'm happy to research that for you. I can say it's within the range of $50,000 to $60,000, but please don't hold me to that number because I don't have it at the top of my head.
Okay, so...
but I'm happy to research that and email it to you tomorrow.
Thank you. I'd appreciate that.
Sure.
Okay, a concerned citizen told me that METCO students are assigned only to the Sanborn building and the Alcott School, and could you tell me if that is true?
Sure. For the last 2 years, we've been involved in a pilot program to provide personalized educational services and support for our students from Boston. So we worked with the elementary teachers to determine what that would look like, and it was determined that we would move our cohort of kindergarten students to the Alcott kindergarten so that they could be in the classroom with more students like themselves. So instead of having 1 or 2 students from Boston in a classroom, we have 4 students in the kindergarten classrooms, 3 kindergarten classrooms. And then in the afternoon, as a group, they walk over to the umbrella and they receive their enriched services at the umbrella. So we've been monitoring their achievement in the last 2 years, and we're pleased to report for the first time our Boston students are achieving at the same rate as our Concord K students.
This citizen expressed the concern that if students from the METCO program are somewhat segregated and kept in only 2 of our 5 K-8 buildings, this kind of looks like the diversity, the goal of diversity is not being met. And this concerned citizen thought that this program would better serve the goal of diversity if the students were evenly distributed throughout all 5 K-8 buildings. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else on Article 11? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So the next article.
Move to Article 12.
The Concord renovations.
Good evening. This slide contains the wording for Article 12 as it appears in the warrant. This slide actually contains the description of Article 12 as it appears underneath the warrant article itself. It requests $870,000 for construction, renovation, repairs, and related work at various CPS sites. It also identifies that $300,000 of the $870,000 will be set aside for contingency funding for the school transportation facility if Article 15 is approved. The $870,000 borrowing is part of the town manager's capital plan, and the associated debt service is within the levy limit. Before discussing the FY17 planned capital projects, we'd like to show you some highlights from our 2016 capital improvements efforts. Major energy efficiency improvements were made in the Sanborn facility with replacement of original installed boilers and replacement of inefficient hot water systems. Walkways at Sanborn were also repaired, and safety concerns on the Thoreau school fields were also addressed. We still have FY16 work to complete, and it includes ADA updates and chimney repointing at Ripley. Before going on to the FY17 capital projects list, we'd like to share some highlights of our FY16 projects. The picture on the left is of one of two large boilers that have been replaced at Sanborn. The picture on the right is of 4 high-efficiency condensing boilers and the new water heaters just on the left-hand side of the right-hand picture. The old unit's efficiency ratings were in the 70% range. Each unit measured 6 foot in diameter and nearly 20 feet in length. Even on moderate and mild winter days, the older boilers both ran and used nearly 13 million BTUs. In contrast, the 4 replacement 95% plus efficient condensing boiler units are staged to run in response to outside temperatures. On a moderate winter day, the newly installed boiler system may use only a percentage of a single boiler's 2 million BTU rating to heat the Sanborn school. We are looking forward to measuring the reduction in natural gas consumption after getting through this winter and going forward. Another project completed was replacement of our improvements to the canopy ceilings at Ripley. They have been replaced with attractive metal panels, eliminating the peeling paint and minimizing wasp, hornets, and beehives around the early childhood students. The playing fields at the Thoreau School have been reloamed and reseeded. The previous soil conditions were not optimal for turf, and there were safety concerns associated with glass that was surfacing through the old fill. For FY17, we are planning 2 modular classrooms for the Sanborn building at an estimated cost of $415,000. Facility assessments of the Sanborn and Peabody buildings will also be conducted to evaluate each building's infrastructure before requesting funding for significant capital improvements. The improvements are intended to extend the useful life of each building while creating buildings suitable to future academic needs. We believe these investments in each building are sound, but want engineering evaluations of all building systems conducted before extensive and expensive design projects begin. The Sanborn and Peabody facility assessments are estimated at $100,000 and $55,000 respectively. The cost difference is due to the size of each building, and as previously noted, $300,000 of the requested $870,000 will be set aside and remain available if needed for contingency for the school transportation facility. Thank you.
Maybe talk a little more about the 2 assessments that are going to be done at the middle school, and
Sure.
and sort of time frame, and who's going to be doing that, or how that's going to
Well, I think this process would be fairly similar to the CCH facilities assessment that was done, the feasibility study that was done back in 2005, prior to the feasibility study that was done that resulted in the new building project. In 2005, an engineering and design and architectural firm was hired, was retained, and they performed an extensive evaluation of the systems, of the building systems, the mechanical, electrical, HVAC, water distribution systems. The entire building's infrastructure was assessed heavily. That was the first piece in evaluating whether or not it made sense to invest in that building, and if the high school could be, after the infrastructure needs were addressed, then the question became, what would it take to take that building and transform it into a building that would last another 50 years and meet academic needs? There were two major cost components that came out of that high school study, which I think parallel the type of outcomes that we expect to see in the facility assessments for Sanborn and Peabody. The first piece of the high school evaluation indicated that about $44 million was needed to renovate the building systems themselves, and roughly another $42 million was needed to enlarge the building and make it suitable for academic needs going forward. The third piece of that study also evaluated the cost of replacing the new building, and it provided a sound footing for the eventual decisions that took place. The MSBA required a feasibility study that was similar, and they went through all of the building options. So doing this at the in CPS at Peabody and Sanborn will allow us to make an informed decision as to whether or not those buildings are appropriate to invest millions of dollars in, and it will also inform us in the best way to proceed.
Okay, and it's it will be a one-year project?
I believe so,
likely?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Just a couple of questions on the capital projects. First is the modular classrooms at Sanborn. The rationale or the needs for that, is that because of increased enrollment at Sanborn or other
It's enrollment, the
factors?
possibility of a grade configuration change, and we also think it will be prudent in anticipation of the eventual work that will be done there, that it will provide swing space during construction phases, because those will have to be phased projects where students are relocated within Sanborn.
So they would be used if you decided to have a
Major.
7, 8 at Sanborn and a 6 at Peabody, as well as construction projects?
Yes, either possibility is met by the placement of those modulars.
Okay. And then the transportation depot contingency, relative to the other proposal in terms of the transportation depot itself, the contingency, I'm not quite sure why that is in Article 12.
It's there as a contingency to provide a measure of additional finances if needed, if Article 15 passes. So the project, and I don't want to speak to Article 15, but if Article 15 passes, it provides $1.9 million, $1.95 million, and the upper range of the project is estimated to need come in as contingency without asking the taxpayers for more than the $1.95 million.
So people are going to be asked to vote on the contingency prior to voting on the project?
No, if Article 15, my understanding is if Article 15 fails, that $300,000 would return as part of the normal capital projects that we would do. Typically, we're running about $800,000 a year in our annual CPS capital town managers plan.
I see.
So this is just setting it aside as
So if Article 15 failed, then what would you apply the $300,000 to if it were not applied to the depot?
We deferred projects at Elcott and Thoreau School with, there were some valving replacements, some energy recovery unit replacements. There was some carpeting work to be done at the Sanborn Forum and the Forum. There were a number of projects that we set aside that we'll push out if needed into following years.
Okay, so you have actual items.
Yes, we had
Would pursue.
we had a FY17 list that totaled $870,000,
Okay.
and we worked with the town in developing this plan for the transportation depot facility.
Okay, so if 15 passed and you were able to bring the budget in at the, whatever, mid-range or whatever, or the targeted range of $1,995,000, then you still then could use this $300,000 for the projects.
That's my understanding and expectation.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Anything else on Article 12, either from the committee or from the audience?
Thank you.
No, I think we have one more. John.
Oh, hi. Judy Zombrecker, 402 Border Road. I had an additional question with regards to the bus depot related to the $300,000. Is there contingency built into the other appropriation both last year and the one proposed this year for this bus depot project?
Yes.
How much?
I don't have the details of that project in my head at the moment, but it is there. I believe it will likely be discussed in Article 15. If not, we can certainly work and get you that answer.
Yeah, and it'd be helpful to know what's in for last year's appropriation to see what the total contingency is for the project.
Yes, there's a layout for the entire project that does identify the contingency.
Do you know what % of the total capital that contingency is?
I think that will be discussed during Article 15. I see the town manager behind who will be presenting that article, and he'll have that detail for you.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else on Article 12? Okay, with that, we'll move to Article 13, the high school budget.
Article 13 will request Concord's portion of the high school budget at $20,719,713. So, of course, we begin the high school budget presentation with our gratitude for our beautiful new high school. It was on time, on scope, and under budget, with a tax impact less than the original projections. So we're very proud of our high school students and their high achievements in the academics, arts, music, athletics, and civic engagement, and that's reflected on the next two slides. And when they leave CCHS, we know that they're more than ready to become the leaders of our world. We're especially proud that more than 94.5% of our students participate in extracurricular activities, and they complete more than 25,000 hours of community service. Again, we begin the CCHS budgeting process in the same way we develop the CPS budget, with these core principles, and decisions regarding staffing, curriculum, technology, resources, and facilities are focused on practices that support teaching and learning, as well as college and career readiness for our students. Enrollment has steadily increased over the past 5 years, 109 students in 2012 to 1,288 students in the current school year. The 10-year enrollment projections provided by NESDEC illustrate that there will be a stable high school population that tapers off from the current enrollment of 1,288 students to 1,214 students in 2026. The FY fiscal year 2017 operating budget increase request is for $805,552. That's a 3.12% increase above last year's operating budget of $25,802,829. And our 5-year operating budget average increase is a modest 2.75%. Our 3.12% requested increase is being made while our fiscal year 2017 fixed costs are increasing at 5.5%. The salary and benefits for teachers and other employees require a 3.4% increase, and non-salary factors require an additional 1.6% growth. Our requested budget increase does not include any new programs or services for the high school. The 5-year average budget increase is 2.75%. The proposed increase of 3.12% is well below the fixed costs of 5.5%. So reductions were made to allow this request to be below the fixed cost growth rate. These are the cost drivers in the fiscal year 2017 budget, and they include the fixed costs for contractual obligations. So for teacher salary, that's $490,000. And then we have benefits, medical insurance, $88,031. Our OPEB obligations, which are future medical, $215,309, and retirement at $86,101. The technology replacement plan was reduced in the previous budget cycles as new technology was funded in the new high school, but we're going to resume that replacement plan, so that's at $220,000. And as John had indicated earlier, we're also going to be adding a bus at the high school, and we'll be resuming our bus replacement cycle in the high school budget, so that's $100,000. So our total fixed obligation is $1,292,115. These fixed cost increase, however, are offset by reductions associated with the new building project. Where we were able to reduce, we did, and we were able to reduce in equipment, utilities, and repairs. We also have an opportunity to reduce some operating costs in campus safety and athletic programs without program reductions. And the way we do that is we're able to charge off salaries in those programs to the revolving fee accounts for parking and athletic programs. And we are able to reduce our special education out-of-district tuition costs as well as professional contingency. So with a fixed cost obligation of $1,292,115, that's offset by the $406,563 of reductions that don't affect programs and services. Our net increase is the $805,552, which equals that 3.12% increase for the operating budget. And this increase does match both the Concord and Carlisle FinCom guidelines. This slide depicts the sources and uses of revenue for the regional school district. The $28,147,960 of assessments, that's shared between Concord and Carlisle. The regional school district contributes $675,000 of its reserves to lower the assessments to the two towns. The state funds are projected total as $2,791,138, and $40,375 of the unused debt service that was assessed last year is available this year towards the projected debt service of $5,046,092. Our salary requirements are projected to be $17,420,598. Our non-salary needs are $8,482,782, and OPEB funding is $705,000. So now the sources and uses are equal, and each total $31,654,473. This slide shows our budget increase history from fiscal year 2013 to 2017. The average increase is 2.76%. However, if you took OPEB out of the equation, the increase would be 2.28%. Concord's apportioned share for the fiscal year 2017 operating budget is $17,035,005. And with a projected debt service of $3,684,708, the total Concord assessment is $20,719,713. And we appreciate the support for the high school budget. Any questions?
One question, and probably not a definitive answer, but the savings that you realized in the first year from utilities and maintenance, is that something that's likely to, as we have more of a history, actually increase? You're going to, or decrease because you're going to see more in the first year, or how should we look at that?
Well, I will have John answer that.
I think as we get more acquainted with the building and the commissioning of the building is fully implemented, that we will see some optimizing of those costs. So we're thinking that we'll see improvements in the natural gas consumption and possibly the electricity.
Thank you.
I know you mentioned that the building came in on time, below budget, and more beautiful than anyone could have imagined. I wondered if you just might recap a bit the expenditures, items remaining for completion, final MSBA reimbursement, just sort of bring the financials to a close here.
We were prepared to do that. I'm more than happy to. We have a handout, and Louis is here from the building committee, so Louis has been working with it.
Yeah, please.
So maybe we'll ask Louis to come up and join us. Thanks, Louis.
Yeah. So we did a full budget review last week, and actually the Concord Journal has a great article on it, which will be tomorrow. So in terms of contracted work left, we have roughly $500,000. We set aside $80,000 for like a contingency on top of what we have for spring, because some of the hills still aren't established, so we want, in case there's erosion or other issues, so we have an $80,000 reserve, and we also set aside $15,000 for a new light pole, a light pole that's needed in the west entrance. So in terms of contractor work, we have $500,000. We have reserves set aside of roughly $90,000, so however you want to count it. Then the building committee last week approved an additional $123,000 in trees and shrubs, mainly in the north entrance, just to add more scale. And then we have roughly $1 million in retainage to pay out over the next 6 months. We actually got a notice from the MSBA yesterday that the audit's going to start soon. We expect that that'll be completed by July.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Thanks, Louis.
And congratulations. Also, could you talk about the enrollment shift, despite the stability, but the shift between Concord and Carlisle, and what the projections are for that mix?
Sure.
The forward-looking projections on the split between Concord and Carlisle continue to show a shift towards Concord, but it's not quite as severe as it was in the projections of 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from the audience or from the committee? Oh, I'm sorry.
Could you just give us a little more insight? Can you please give us a little more insight into the OPEB liability, which is growing rapidly? What is that unfunded liability, and what is the ARC to meet that?
The ARC is roughly about $1.3 million. We've been building that up in a planned fashion. The plan has been disrupted on occasion by budgetary limitations, but we are back on track. There were years when we couldn't build enough into the budget, but we needed to do. The unfunded liability, of course, is changing as health insurance rates change and salary obligations change. And while I have the ARC handy, at about $1.3 million. I believe the unfunded liability is roughly 40% of the town's unfunded liability. So I'm going to say something like $9 or $10 million.
There's Tony in the back.
And Tony's going to correct me. 17. Okay. I was wrong.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
Ann Hayden, 342 Sudbury Road. For several years, I have been watching the permits with respect to the building committee, which back several years ago, the building committee took a vote and said that when everything was all done, the town would get $100,000 for all of the permitting and work that was done. And so I'm wondering, now that we're down to the end, has that money been paid to the town? Is that in the budget? When will that money get paid?
That $100,000 is still available for that payment.
And when will that happen? Is it not going to be until absolutely everything else has been done, or can that be done now? June. I'll hold you to it. Great. Thank you.
Oh, hi, Leanne Kay, 262 Virginia Road. I have just a general question pertaining to teacher benefits, staff benefits, and how it impacts the budgets of both school systems. I was told that there's a benefit whereby staff from out of town can educate their children here in Concord at taxpayer expense, and I was told there's about 200 children that we are educating. Now, is that wrong?
No, excuse me, it's wrong.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank
and
you.
I want to say no to 200, it's 36 students currently.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
That's all I'd
Sorry,
like to
it's
know.
36.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. We will move to Article 14, landfill.
This is the article as printed in the warrant. Article 14 requests funding to perform the state-required remediation of the former private landfill on the high school campus. The Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection has approved the plan and the timeline for the remediation project this article funds. As noted on the slide, the cost of this project will be assessed to Concord and Carlisle for the term that is selected for the bonding period. The regional school district will work with the finance directors of Concord and Carlisle to determine the bond duration that is optimal to the communities. We expect the debt service impact to commence in FY17. In order to prepare for the town meeting process and to determine the amount for this project, we've gone out to bid, and it's important to note that the bids are binding. The construction aspects of this project have been bid at $887,800. Project management fees have been negotiated in the amount of $45,000, and contingency and soft cost allowances are budgeted at $167,200. These costs total the $1.1 million requested in this budget. The work that's being done is designed to satisfy the requirements as defined by the Massachusetts Contingency Plan in 310 CMR 40. The selected remediation plan consists of capping the 3.5-acre affected site and will utilize the components listed on the slide to permanently isolate the contaminated soils. The capping process will include installation of a geosynthetic clay liner with a flexible membrane liner, a gravel and pea stone subbase, a plastic marker, or high visibility mirror fill filter fabric to protect intrusion to the cap in the future, with about 2 feet of fill above the marker. The skateboard park will remain available, and a retaining wall will provide the transition from the raised capped area to the skateboard park. The skateboard park will have proper access, and the remediated site will have appropriate drainage systems installed. This remediation was chosen as it does not disturb the contaminants and economically provides protection to nearby water sources. Other options were also considered and included soil excavation and off-site disposal at an estimated cost of $15 million. The $15 million assumed that 10% of the removed soils would contain hazardous waste. The cost would vary according to the percentage of actual contaminated soils. As you can see, the cost range is significantly above the selected method, and option one cost may be unpredictable. The second method also included excavation, and along with soil treatment and processing, this cost was estimated at $9 million. The third method treated and processed the soils on site and was estimated at a cost of $5 million. The state DEP has approved the submitted plan and has defined the remediation project timeline that must be met. The permanent engineered barrier approach was selected due to its low cost and predictability. Thank you.
Any questions on Article 14?
Yes, John, are there any, once the remediation is complete, is there any testing, a testing program that needs to be in place long-term or not?
There's a long-term monitoring process. You have to make sure that the cap remains intact, and there's groundwater testing and so forth that takes place.
I see, and if at any time then anything is determined afterwards, then that would require additional return to...
If the cap were to fail at some point in the future for some reason, it would have to be repaired.
Addressed.
Yes.
Thank you.
John, Wendy Ravelli, the Finance Committee, just sort of two comments, because there probably are some people who are not familiar with the landfill contamination, so maybe in your presentation you might want to give a little intro to the background to that. And then
Sure.
the second is, when I saw these presentations in the past, there were some great graphics of where this contamination was, and maybe an updated graph with the new building sites so people understand where it is now relative to all the new parking lots and all that. Just
We can
a
provide that.
recommendation you could consider.
We can
might
provide
help.
that, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I understand, Philip Swain from the Finance Committee. I understand this will cost $1.1 million. I think this is going to come up with respect to the next Article 15, but did you, and the next cost up would be $5 million, but did you look into what it would cost to just, instead of capping this with a clay cap, paving it and using it as either a parking lot or as a basis for a bus depot?
The passive use limitation or the engineering barrier was chosen because it was the lowest cost. It didn't disturb the soils, and it didn't open up the possibility of significant cost growth if the amount of contaminated soil exceeded the 10% that was built into the estimate. The $5 million piece may not have gone deep enough for any type of building that might have been needed for the storage or septic tanks. That would have probably gone below the depth that the $5 million remediation process may have gone to.
So you don't know whether you don't know the price point for a paving project, is what you're saying, as opposed to the clay cap?
Well, you're talking about I believe if I understand you correctly, you're comparing it to the transportation depot facility, which isn't limited to just paving.
Right. I guess there would be a building, so we don't know is the cost. Okay.
Is there anything from the audience? Yes.
D. Ortner, 169 Thoreau Street. Continuing along with the questions over here, I'm curious to know what you could build on this 3.5 acre area if we were to select a different remediation plan.
I really can't answer that question.
Okay, so with the 3.5 acres...
To excavate, to excavate to the depths that might be needed to put in footings, storage lines, gas lines, electrical conduits, would certainly be well beyond the $1.1 million.
I would agree with that, but I'm just wondering, if we were to select option 3, would that, and it worked out, would we be able to build affordable housing on the site? Could we have playing fields on the site? Could we have another school building on the site? I'm just wondering I understand the idea of cost, but I'm wondering, this is a good, a good location.
Yes.
And it's 3.5 acres.
The passive use limitation will allow for light sport activities on top of the grass. It will not allow for any of the other items for building.
I understand that. So you eliminated these other options because of cost?
Correct.
Correct. Okay, thank you.
Judy Zombrecker, 402 Border Road. Could you expand on what passive recreation, what that encompasses? I thought I understood it until your last comment.
I believe it would encompass walking, running. There's a Frisbee club at the high school, pick-up soccer games.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Would playing fields be part of passive recreation?
I don't think you'd see playing fields installed there because you would have to excavate a little bit, put down a base, a sub-base. I'm not an engineer, so I can't go too far with it, so it's a layman's interpretation of what might be doable. But I don't believe that penetrating it, going in deeper, preparing the soils, compacting the soils, they could endanger the cap.
Okay, so it's excavation that's
Yes.
the key
And
issue. Okay.
the other thing that we need to keep in mind is that this is adjacent to the water source for the town, one of the water sources for the town, so we don't want to disturb that. We want to be as gentle as possible in that area.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Marcia Rasmussen, Director of Planning and Land Management for the Town of Concord, and I just want to add to John's statement there. This site is in the Groundwater Conservancy District, and they've already exceeded the amount of lot coverage that is allowed under zoning. With the redevelopment of the site for the high school, they reduced that number, but it still is in excess of what the zoning allows. So any additional coverage of the land area in there would require a variance.
Thank you, Marcia.
Any other questions on Article 14? Okay, thank you very much. We will next move to Town Manager for Article 15, the Transportation Facility. Appropriately teed up for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. Chris Whalen, Town Manager. I live at 1935 Main Street. Article 15 requests a sum of $1.95 million to augment the funds that were previously appropriated in order to build a state-of-the-art school transportation facility in West Concord. In the recent activities that have taken place in the past show that at the May 2014 special town meeting under Article 1, the purchase of 37 Knox Trail was authorized and completed in November of 2014. In the April 2015 special town meeting under Article 1, the Select Board was authorized to take the W.R. Grace property, 80 acres along the Acton-Concord town line by eminent domain, and that taking was completed in August of last year. In 2014, an appropriation of $925,000 was authorized by town meeting to build a transportation facility, and again in April of 2015, an additional sum of $950,000 was appropriated. This is a slide that you've seen from prior years that just points out where the W.R. Grace site is located in West Concord. It's 80 acres running up to the commuter rail line and down to the river, and the Knox Trail is here, and that's the entrance, and 37 Knox Trail is that parcel there. So that's the area that we're talking about. The building will be located in this general area, the southern portion of the property. Upon receiving the approval to move forward with the project, the Public Works Director, Rich Rain, was assigned as project manager for the town to coordinate the design and construction activities, and town engineer Bill Renault, who's here tonight, it was assigned to help out with engineering assistance. They collaborated to solicit proposals to hire an OPM, an owner's project manager, which is required under state law for any project costing more than $1.5 million. And Vertex Companies was selected as the OPM. And then the owner's project manager is supposed to collaborate with the owner to select a designer, an architect. So again, through a competitive bidding process, Weston and Sampson engineers were selected as the architect engineer. And they got started on the project in the fall of last year. And began by interviewing school transportation administrative staff about what the needs are for the new facility. We have since, because the property was taken by eminent domain and we gained title to it in August, we then had access to it. Prior to August, we did not have access to the site. So we know a bit more about it now. This slide lays out, shows where the site access is. You see the setback from the river. There's a 200-foot setback from the riverfront area that can't be disturbed. There's also the National Heritage Species Protection Program, where there are endangered species located in that area, so there's some setback areas there. And then there's some steep slopes that have to be addressed. And the yellow line is the Tennessee Gas Pipeline. The area to the north, on the same property, but to the north of the planned transportation facility, is where the CMLP solar array will go. Bids were open in December. 5 companies responded to the request to construct a large solar array, and that is expected, work on that is expected to begin. The Planning Board is now hearing their application for approval, and work should begin later this spring on that. Site requirements, as now identified by our engineers and architects, are that after consulting with the school staff, is that we require 43 parking spaces for employees, bus parking for 40 feet long buses, a fueling facility, above-ground fueling facility, stormwater management, access to the light plant. Solar array has to be accommodated on that site, as well as the transportation building itself. So here you'll see the conceptual design of how this would lay out. Again, Knox Trail is the road over here, and the access way comes in here. The facility will be located up here. Stormwater detention, you can see there's steep grades here that lead down to the river, so it's important to manage the stormwater that's running off the paved surfaces. There's parking for the 40 buses here, and here, and the employee parking is here closest to the structure at 37 Knox Trail, which is over here. And the building program, consultant interviewed the maintenance staff, identified personnel responsibilities, what the employees must do, developed a vehicle and equipment inventories of what equipment was already owned and wouldn't need to be acquired as part of the project. They reviewed daily workflow patterns, maintenance practices, and reviewed the building with respect to industry standards, because again, we made a commitment to make this a state-of-the-art facility for safety, environmental protection, and so sustainability. Repairing school buses is no easy task. You can see it's hard physical work, and it's important to have enough space available for the employees to work safely around the equipment and the vehicles. So that's a typical scene that you might see on a workday. The building itself, the floor plan looks like this. There are 4 bays, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 buses could be housed at any given time. This bay on the end has a drive-through, so if a bus comes in on a tow truck, that can be towed into the building, and the tow truck can leave, or if it has to leave on a tow truck, it can go out that way. The other 3 bays just have the one entrance. There's an employee support space for an office, a break room, men's and women's lockers and lavatories, and the parts area is here, and fuel storage is here. The plan also includes a mezzanine area, so this is a stairway leading up to a mezzanine area that just covers this general area here for additional storage of tires, equipment. The HVAC system would be up on the 2nd floor on the mezzanine and so forth. And the proposed building is a cost-effective, pre-engineered metal building, factory foam insulated wall panels on a durable masonry base, only about 5 feet tall. So it won't be masonry walls all the way up. It'll be low masonry walls to keep the metal off the ground, but then metal walls that are insulated roof, a code-required heating and ventilation system, also a sprinkler system, which is important. That's a new code requirement, and it's included in this building. And then very basic building finishes. It's not a luxury building at all. It's a very utilitarian building. Here are the elevations, the front elevations here with the entrances, and the personnel entrance here with some windows. There are passive light monitors allowing natural light into the workspace to hopefully reduce the use of electricity. There is the rear of the building with a single garage door going out the back, and these are the side views with, again, some effort to bring natural light into the building. This is what it would look like. Very similar in design with 4 bays and natural light up above. So the conceptual cost estimate, the building cost is estimated at $211 per square foot for a total of $1.3 million. Construction costs roughly. The fuel system, it's a dual pump, so single tank, 5,000-gallon tank, but with pumps to fuel 2 vehicles at the same time. $135,000. Site development costs include grading, site preparation, installation of utilities, septic systems, and paving is a big part of that site development cost, and the stormwater management, which is complicated, so being so close to the river. The contractor markup cost is there. And then the question was raised earlier about the contingency. We've allowed for a 15% contingency for this project, which is a bit more than normal. But again, this is a federal Superfund site. Some extensive cleanup work has been done on the site, but we think it's prudent to have a fair, at least good-sized contingency allowance here in case we do discover unacceptable materials. Fortunately, in January, the engineers were out doing the borings where the footings will go and where the septic system will go and the stormwater management system will go, and didn't detect any unacceptable materials. So far, the areas where we expect to be digging, we've done some borings and haven't seen any problems. But we still think it's prudent to have a reasonable contingency given the site's history. That's the subtotal of construction costs is $3.5 million, and then there's the soft costs, so-called the professional services related to the OPM, the architectural and design fees, and then the construction management fees while the building is under construction. So the total project cost is $4.125 million. Again, repeating that number at the top of this page, the available appropriations, as I mentioned earlier, is combined $925,000 from 2014, $950 from 2015, and then in 2016, that was discussed earlier, that $300,000 of the Concord Public Schools annual allocation for building improvements is being made available for this project as well, bringing the total to $2,175,000. That leaves the project $1.95 million short of what's needed to construct, again, a state-of-the-art facility. So back to the language of the warrant article, and I'll just draw your attention to the end of the warrant article mentions that this, we would propose that this funding be subject to a debt exclusion vote, Proposition 2.5 override debt exclusion vote. So voters would be given two shots at approving the project. The project would require a 2/3 vote to authorize the borrowing at town meeting, and then a majority vote at the polls to authorize the debt exclusion if town meeting agrees to make to fund the project and to make the funding subject to a ballot vote. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Could you talk about either change in initial thoughts for design or cost differences from when we've looked at this for the first couple of times?
Originally, the school department did have Sandy Brock from Niche Engineering provided an estimate of about 2.1 to 2.4 million in costs, but not included in that were some of the oversight, the OPM costs, some of the soft costs were not included. The contingency was not included. That's a significant cost. And the site design work was nearly as much as the construction cost. Constructing the building is 1.3 million. The site costs were 1.1 million, and that was unexpected. That the stormwater management and other features would be as expensive as that. So there were a number of things that contributed to the project costing more than was originally anticipated.
Chris, Terry Ackerman, East Bridge Road. The contingency, if you end up not needing that much, what happens to the surplus funds at the end?
I asked that of Tony Legalbo just when the contingency matter was being discussed, and he said he would assume that it would revert to the CPS, the first 300,000 of it would revert to the CPS construction budget for the two projects at Alcott, was it, that were deferred. So that would be the likely.
And then after that, if you even have more than that, then?
It would be borrowing author. Either the funds wouldn't be borrowed to begin with, or if the funds were borrowed, they would revert back to the general fund.
Okay. And if this proposed article does not pass at town meeting or with the debt exclusion, is there any kind of a plan B that you're thinking of yet?
I haven't been asked to come up with a plan B. I'm working on plan A.
Got it. Thank you.
So then, staying with Plan A, assuming we go through the two steps, what's the likely in-service date for the building, and is that?
The Public Works Director anticipated, originally a year ago, we thought that we might be able to deliver the building by December of 2016. At the moment, Bill, I think the plan is January? April of 2017.
Thank you.
Yeah, Chris. Carl Packard, member of the Finance Committee. I just had a question about the line for basically the construction administration, the estimated construction fees, which are almost equal to the design fees. And I was wondering, what kind of, well, first of all, what is the construction period that you're expecting that to cover? And are you planning on having a full-time clerk of the works or something? Because that just seemed...
Let me attempt an answer, Mr. Packard, and then I'll have Bill correct what I... So we would begin, we're in the process of beginning to obtain permits, and so if town meeting authorizes, both the town meeting and the voters authorize the debt exclusion, we'd continue on the current course that we're going on, and again, construction, which should be completed about a year after the meeting convenes in April. And then in terms of the, we will have a clerk of the works. That's partly what the owner's project manager does, but why don't I have the town engineer respond to that?
No, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. The OPM would act as the clerk of the works, and then...
that would be full-time on-site?
Full-time on-site.
Okay.
And then we'd also have, you know, for requests for information, that type of thing, we would have our design engineer on retainer, so that would be the architect and engineer services.
And why is the amount is almost as much as the design cost?
Well, I mean, really, I think
if you're going to have somebody full-time, that's...
I mean, well, that's really part of the cost. That's part of the cost. And I mean, I wouldn't say it's really the same. I mean, we have another $88,000 with the owner's project manager's fees, too. So that was probably about 2/3 of the cost, or maybe a little bit less than that. So, you know, and keep in mind, the request for information, it's not necessarily all going to be spent necessarily. So if there's a good design and we get a good contractor, and we don't have a lot of questions on the design, then that number would potentially be lower too. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Chris, Linda Miller with the Finance Committee. I have a question about the provision of water to the site, and where would that be included in your cost estimates?
There's been an allowance for a traditional water connection. We have applied to the Acton Water District for the installation of a 1-inch line for domestic supply of water to the building, and a 6-inch line, I think it is, for fire protection, additional hydrant for fire protection. The district has said that they are not allowed to expand the coverage of the Acton Water District without legislative approval. So we are on the March 5th agenda for the Acton Water District town meeting, their equivalent of town meeting for the district on March 5th, to request that the district propose legislation, and we will seek, if approved, we will seek that legislation and hopefully be successful in that. And so and if successful, the $50,000 should be adequate. If it's not, if the district says no, they're not interested, and they don't approve of that, then we'll have to look for alternative means of providing water, drinking water, and fire suppression water for the facility. Bill, do you have any comments on what the alternatives to that might be?
Sure. So we've explored a few options, and we're in the process of doing an alternative analysis and cost-benefit analysis to see which approach we'll use. One is a siphon that will essentially a directional drill underneath the Assabet to bring it to the site. That's obviously fairly costly, but that would use up some of the contingency funds. Another option is essentially like a cistern that's available for portable, and then also a well potentially dug for fire suppression, so that we'd have a fire cistern essentially on site too. So we're evaluating all of these different options, as well as bottled water for drinking and that type of thing. So we have a few options, and we'll have that information probably within the next month or so.
So that you'd have your recommendation or your resolution by town meeting?
That's the intent, yep.
Thank you. And one other question, I'm not familiar with this, maybe I've missed it. What is the Tennessee gas pipeline, and what do you know about it?
That's a good question.
Does everybody else know about it?
It's a transmission line, so essentially it's just a restriction on how much we can use the parcel. So you have to cross them essentially on a perpendicular path with a road. They're concerned about depths of utilities below and that type of thing, but it's pretty common to construct over them. So.
Okay. And we have no concerns about the status of that pipeline?
Not at all, none.
Okay.
None.
Thank you.
I would just comment that the light plan is also constructed, the light plan administrative and ops center is very close to, very similarly located to the Tenneco gas. It's a 36-inch high-pressure force main for gas, but it's no problem to be located near it. Bill, on bid opening, do we have a date for when we would have I think our goal is to have a bid opening so we know real numbers relative to these construction costs. The goal was to have that slightly before, maybe a week or two before town meeting convenes, but it depends on if everything comes together. So we don't want to guarantee that we'll have bids in hand at the time, April 4th, when town meeting meets, but that we're working hard to make that happen, or he's working hard to make that happen.
Pretty aggressive schedule.
Thank you.
Chris, Phil Swain from the Finance Committee. Question about the use of the building. I understood that one of the other uses besides bus maintenance is for small engine and small vehicle maintenance for the schools, like lawnmowers and snow blowers and that sort of thing. Is that correct, and is that what's going to be going on there? And is there anything that can be done to save money by not having that there or doing something alternatively?
My understanding is that the vehicle mechanics serve buses, but they also repair passenger vehicles, vans, and lawnmowers, weed whackers. The school department owns a dump truck that they use for plowing and so forth. So all of those engines, small engines and large engines, will be repaired at this site. Is that correct? Yeah. So I'm sorry, the second part of your question?
Well, my understanding is there's no place to do that at the high school currently. Is there any way that could be, an alternative site could be found and you could reduce the size of this building to save money?
We did some value engineering when the school committee first heard about the higher than anticipated costs. We did do some value engineering and looked at some alternatives of reducing the number of bays, eliminating the mezzanine, eliminating the fueling. Bill, do you recall what the numbers were for eliminating one of the bays, for example?
I have it. I have it here, but off the top of my head, I believe it was short money, about $75,000. It wasn't, an extraordinary savings. I mean, within the value engineering, we looked at a bunch of items and found that really, if we were to move forward with any of these cuts, it would have substantial, programmatic changes. I mean, not paving the site, eliminating the utility, the fueling, those types of items. And if we move forward with that approach, I mean, we weren't saving big dollars.
Any other questions from the...
A few from the audience.
D. Ortner, 169 Thoreau Street. I have a couple questions for you. The first one is, if you do find contamination during the construction, is it Concord's responsibility to pay the cost, or is it W.R. Grace?
We would believe that W.R. Grace would be responsible, but we were concerned that with the project not come to a screeching halt while we pursue funding of any remediation through W.R. Grace. So what we would do is continue to do the remediation ourselves and see if we can recover the cost from the company.
Okay, that's question one. Question two, could the facility be used for town equipment, for maintenance of town equipment?
That's not in the plan. I think that we've sized the building for what the school department needs to repair their vehicles. They have 40 buses, a number of other passenger vehicles, and other pieces of equipment. So we've sized it for precisely what the school department is currently using it for. So we don't anticipate using it in that way. But if a bay was available or equipment was available, it could conceivably be used for that.
Okay. Do you have, question three, do you have electric chargers in the queue for this? And is it a fast electric charger that costs like $63,000?
Well, I don't know if it's fast, but we are planning to incorporate the electric chargers, and we're coordinating with the school department now on that.
Okay, good. And then my last question. If Article 14 and Article 15 pass, both of them have this debt service omission, or however you want to describe it, in there, the Proposition 2.5% debt exclusion. What would be the impact to the median price property in tax impact? And maybe Tony has an estimate.
Hopefully Tony has it.
Tony Legalbo, Town Finance Director. I try to keep the back of an envelope with me at all times. And my best estimate for the impact on Article 14, the remediation, it would add about 1/8% or $14 per to the median tax bill. Article 15, this article, best estimate is that would add about $27 or about 1/4% to the median tax bill. 18. We haven't gotten there. The best estimate on that on the Minuteman Tech assessment, that's a highly variable thing. It will be dependent on the enrollment of Concord and all the other members, whoever they are, at the given time, and a lot of other factors which are in the new proposed agreement, which change how things work. But my best guess, and that's not even an envelope, that's a stamp, is that it would be about $250,000 assessed to Concord based on our current enrollment and on the expected member enrollment, and that's about 1/3%. So all these things together is about $70 on the median tax bill, all told, if they all pass.
Tanya Galis, Prescott Road. I spoke with Mr. Giles when I first came in asking why Article 16 about alternative bus depot wasn't discussed tonight also, and he said he didn't know, that's just how it was set up. And he advised me not to address that article, and I was going to obey, but I was. But since there was a question about what happens if Article 15 does not pass, and I know that Article 16's sponsor, Mr. Hansen, does want Article 15 to pass, but even if it doesn't, Article 16 becomes very important and very significant. It's not just a suggestion to consider another location in the future for the bus depot. It is a serious article about, so where else do we put the bus depot? For that reason, I believe that Article 16 should be presented in a more comprehensive manner, including specific suggestions for a location. In fact, a member of the Finance Committee did ask yesterday, and no clear answer was given. I did watch it on video. It's clear that the only considerations are not the landfill or the high school, and that's not surprising because neither is really very realistic in terms of what support it has gotten before. So I just wanted to add this comment. I think it's very important to be more clear about Article 16 and not take it as a very mild suggestion. Thank you.
Leanne Kay, 262 Virginia Road. I have a theoretical question, which I think the school administration would be equipped to answer. We have 35 students who are children of employees who we're educating at taxpayer expense. It seems to me that if that benefit were eliminated, we'd save about $500,000 a year. And would that $500,000 be helpful in paying for expensive projects like this? Thank you.
36 students are spread across 13 grade levels, so we would not be saving $500,000.
How much does it cost to educate a child on average in Concord Public Schools and the regional school district?
So I would say currently, if you looked at our operating budget and you divide it by the number of students currently enrolled, you'd find that it's approximately $17,000 per student in CPS that we're spending, and that it's probably closer to $19,000 to $20,000 at the high school district.
So it would be a savings of about $500,000.
I would respectfully disagree with the calculation in that where would the savings be? You could not take away teachers. If we have 36 students, we would not be releasing 3 or 4 teachers because, as I said, it would be the 36 students are spread across all grade levels, 7 schools, 5 or 6 schools, so there wouldn't be savings.
Okay. Any other questions on this article? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
We will now move to Minuteman and Article 17, which is the budget, and Carrie Flood, please.
Okay. We unfortunately do not have our superintendent or assistant superintendent for finance here tonight because they are both in other communities. If you can imagine 16 towns trying to reach agreement on the document by March 1st, 16 towns times about 3 meetings each in 1 month is quite a tall order. So I'm going to cover the budget myself, and Carmen will cover the building project. And our budget book is in full on the Minuteman website, but I don't have copies here for you tonight. And I'm going to try. All right. Our first and most obvious goal is always to support the educational interests and needs of our diverse student population. You'll see a little bit more about it later, but in terms of diversity, we need to stress that that includes the learning styles, and Minuteman supports over 50% of its percentage is actually higher from member communities than it is for out-of-district communities. We had a commitment to no net increase in staffing, to level fund supplies and services, and any purchase of instructional equipment is based on long-term needs, with the exception of small hand tool kind of things that need to be replaced for the short term. Any investments in equipment will be for things that would be transportable into the new building when we get to that point. We also are going to rely on increased use of grant funds. That can be government funds, and in some cases, that is grants from area employers who have an interest in the skills that graduates from Minuteman come out of the school possessing. The budget for FY17 is planned based on an assumption that the building project passes one way or another by June 30th. If that does not, of course, we'll have to go back to the drawing board, no pun intended, I guess, on what we do in terms of maintenance in the near term. But the plan is to issue debt early in July, and that the first payment of $500,000 would be due 6 months into fiscal year 2017. We have a goal of maintaining our E&D balance between 3.5 and 4.5%. The maximum allowed under state law for a regional school district is 5%. We have a list of short-term repairs, in other words, things that must be done now, either to prepare the site to be ready for the construction project, or things that are such a desperate need that we can't postpone them any longer. These will be done during the summer, but using funds from the FY16 budget. And in estimating our E&D balance at the end of the school year, we have already subtracted the price tag for these items. Obviously, we must support our contractual agreement obligations, and that's primarily the teachers. We are planning for a 5% increase in health insurance, 3% in general insurance. We are planning for capital needs, I've explained. We do have, I think it's in the order of $400,000, I could be wrong, in a stabilization fund that would help us with that next year. Our school bus transportation contract was recently rebid. We tried twice, but only had one bidder, and there's a significant increase, and you'll see the 8% here. We're working on some concepts that could reduce the impact of that over the course of the next year. But right now we need to plan for the worst case on that. And an appropriation for a contribution to the OPEB funding is symbolic at about $50,000, but it is progress. Our regular retirement, by the way, is one of the few funds that is very close or at, depending on the year you measure it, to full funding. We will continue our transition to a 628 student enrollment. That's the size of the school which has been agreed to for reconstruction. That means we will continue to focus on increasing the enrollment from our member communities. For next year, for instance, we already have over 200 applications for the entering freshman class, and if only 50% of those students end up coming to Minuteman, that would mean a 20% increase in our in-district freshman class. We will be allocating 10% of our utility costs to revolving accounts. That's primarily rental use of the facility. The pool is a big piece of that. Overheads and administration have previously been partially allocated to those accounts, and we're adding utilities to that this year. We plan to lease 2 smaller school buses for student activities. That's one of the steps I talked about in hoping to reduce the cost of overall transportation. And we will continue professional development efforts, training of teachers, moving towards the academy model, which would be fully achieved with the new building. We will be reducing staff to align with the smaller school. It's an overall reduction for next year of 11.5 FTEs, with most of that coming from teaching positions, and I want to indicate that some of those 8, not all, are positions that were in the budget for the current year but have not been filled. So it's not that total amount of bodies leaving. And we have offered an incentive for early retirement notification, and we have some indication of people that will be taking that option. On the funding side, we've estimated an increase of over $21,000 in Chapter 70. Transportation reimbursement rides with the actual cost of transportation. We're projecting, or we're budgeting for 60%. We think it may be closer to 62%, but 60% seemed safe. And I've described at one of the coordination meetings the decrease in the out-of-district tuition. 2/3 of that impact, or the 36 fewer students enrolled this year. And the rest of it comes from a reduction in the maximum tuition, base tuition, that is allowed under state regulation. Our out-of-district communities are responsible for their own transportation. They're not part of our contract. And they can also be charged a fee for special education if they have a student who is coming to us with that need. And that currently is an additional $4,500 on top of the tuition. And that's all figured in there. We also are planning on the use of $825,000 from our E&D as already certified. And that's much higher than we have been able to do in the past. All right. The total budget is a decrease of about 0.5%, and the assessment to the towns is an increase of approximately 0.5%. It's important to note that even though we are reducing the number of students deliberately, we can't close a program as long as there is an existing student in the building. So that means some sharing of capacity, some sharing of instruction, but we have 2 programs that are being closed, being phased out now. But we cannot do it overnight. The next slide shows the enrollment from in-district and out-of-district, which is the gray, and the line is the total assessments. So you can see how the effect of bringing in out-of-district students has helped to control the overall cost to our member communities, regardless of fluctuations in the number of students that they are sending from one year to another, or in the total decline of enrollment over the last few years. The average increase in assessments to all 16 communities is less than 1.3% a year over these 10, I think that's 8 or 9 years there. Next, for where the major changes in the expense budget are for the coming year, most of it is in instructional services. That's the teachers that I talked about, which won't be there next year, or actually weren't there this year. And you'll see a sort of swap from asset acquisition and improvement to debt service. And the major changes in the revenue plan I've already talked about, with the big one being the prior year tuition. Note, because tuition is paid quarterly over the course of the year, it is our practice to use primarily last year's tuition to fund this year's budget and vice versa, and only $400,000 a year of the current tuition is planned for in the budget. And here you see the fluctuation over the last many years of Concord's enrollments. This is maybe a little bit more dramatic than in some of the other communities that are members, but it illustrates the point that Concord's assessment moves primarily because of the change in enrollment. Next slide. The total enrollment of 16 this year, and you saw it was 7 only a few years ago. 16 were there on October 1st, 2014, which was used for the budget for FY16. 17 are there now. That includes 2 postgrads. The difference is that the postgrads are included in calculation of state aid and the current year assessment, but not in capital. You can also see how many students Concord is sending that are on an IEP, and I want to stress that that does not speak to how well these students learn or their ability to learn. It merely speaks to how they learn, and vocational education works better for these kids. And you can see our change, our share there. Okay. And that is the major presentation. If there are questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. Rich.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. The 200 applications for freshmen, those were all in district that you were talking about. And those were all, that's across 16 towns.
That is across 16 towns. I don't know what the breakdown from town to town is.
You don't have a Concord number for that?
I do not have a Concord number.
Okay.
There are a number of questions I have anticipated and asked our administration, which they have not had time to answer because they are responding. I think it's fair to say that they are giving priority to questions from communities that are considering withdrawal.
And then for the as we look at the budget, and I know you won't have an exact number, but maybe we can just talk orders of magnitude, or how it would impact fiscal year 17 if we have a number of towns that opt out. Will that be in time to affect fiscal year 17, or would it be after that?
It will not impact FY17 because their exit from the region could not be before July 1st, 2017.
Okay.
They're in, and the formula for next year's assessments is set.
Okay.
Under state law, that needs to be done now for next year.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Carrie, Wendy, Ravelli, I just had one question. You mentioned if 50% of those 200 applications, is that typical? 50% of the applications do actually enroll?
It's actually a little bit higher in most cases. We're being conservative based on the, because we haven't seen this number of applications in many years.
Well, and you've also been advertising quite a bit, actually.
Yes.
It sounds like that.
And
been very successful.
Doing outreach to the schools. We've had more kids come to open houses at the school and do a shadow day than have been offered in the past. And it's been, a lot of people have taken advantage of it.
That's good. It's positive. It's great.
Terry Ackerman, Heathbridge Road Finance Committee. You mentioned 2 programs that are being phased out. How many different programs do you have at the school, and what are the 2 that are being phased out?
That's the very last slide, Sean, if you want to go to that.
Oh, that looked like it.
We just go by it.
Go back one.
So there's the list of programs that are there in the current year and the number of total students that are enrolled in them. The 2 that are in the process of being phased out are marketing and telecommunications. Both of those are actually going to, the basic skills will be included in other programs.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you.
And in the long run, and particularly as we move to the new building, another major change is moving from, you'll see metal fabrication here, which includes something like welding and that kind of stuff. That's going to be converted into state-of-the-art manufacturing methods, which can really only be achieved in the new building.
Thank you.
Carrie, I just have one more question. You know, as you've been planning the new building, you've been outreaching to the local business community around their needs. What are the programs on that list up there that have the most demand and you're looking to really grow?
Well, what I will say is that we have balanced student interest with industry interest. We can't do everything that everybody wants in a school the size of 628 students. The optimal size or the optimal number of students for a particular program is in the neighborhood of 40. The program at Minuteman, kids will week in academics. So we're talking about how many teachers and how many desks as they alternate from one to the other. So it's a balance.
Carrie, Phil Swain from the Finance Committee. You mentioned that the school bus contract increased by 8%. And is that an outsourced bus contract?
It is.
And there was one bidder for that this year? In the past, have there been more than one bidder?
Yes. I don't know how many.
But do you know if there's some reason why there was only one bidder?
Yes, because of the distance and the number of buses.
Because of what?
The geographic area is what we were told.
Are there fewer companies now in the bus transportation business?
I don't know the answer to that question. But remember, we're over 30 miles from one end of the district to the other, and the school is placed much closer to the east end to be in the vicinity of the 128 area. So buses are traveling all the way to Lancaster a couple of times a day, and in the other direction, going as far as Needham and Dover to the south. Anything else?
Anything else?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Carmen's up.
Move to Article 18.
Carmen Reese, Select Board, and also one of Concord's members on the School Building Committee for Minuteman. So Article 18 requests town meeting approval for the borrowing of $144,922,478 by the Minuteman Regional Vocational and Technical High School for construction of a new school, and to approve a debt exclusion for Concord's allocable share of the debt service on that borrowing. The article will be contingent on approval of the amendments to the district's regional agreement by all 16 member towns on or before March 1st, and that is one of our subjects for special town meeting tomorrow night. And I can tell you that the two towns that have taken it up so far, Arlington and Acton, have each approved the amendments. And now Stowe. Thank you. Okay, so that's 3. Okay, so I'm just going to briefly talk with you about what Minuteman offers to Concord, why we need a building project, what the MSBA process has been so far. I'll tell you a little bit about the proposed project. And I know there have been a lot of questions about the costs. I'll speak briefly about the cost of vocational technical high schools versus ordinary high schools, and then finally about the cost to Concord. Okay, so Minuteman, you're not going? Okay, I'll do it. No worries. Okay. Okay, so there's my overview. All right. So Minuteman is Concord's high school for experiential learning. About 65% over the long term do go on to college or other postgraduate education, about 35% directly to careers. The school offers a rigorous academic program, including AP courses. It also offers industry-supported career and technical education in 19 career majors. Many state and professional certifications can be obtained by students at the school. It has a vibrant sports, arts, and drama program, and it also offers post-grad and a number of community programs. Concord's one of 16 towns in the Minuteman District, and that's subject to regional agreement amendment. There may be fewer after those amendments are taken up by 16 towns. Concord's been a member of the district since Minuteman opened back in '72. The attendance varies, and as Carrie just told us, currently it's at 17. Operating and capital costs in the district are apportioned by a formula. That formula is going to change in the amendments to the district agreement. Out-of-district students are permitted to attend, space permitting. They are currently assessed an operating fee that's set by the Department of Education, and soon they will be assessed also a capital fee, again set by the Department of Education for MSBA-approved projects. Okay, so why do we need a building project? The current building conditions really do demand to be addressed. The educational program really requires an updating of the physical plant. And then finally, the school's accreditation is in jeopardy. It's currently on probation, and that's solely due to the condition of the building. Okay, so current building conditions. There are structural code construction problems. They've been identified in a whole bunch of different engineering surveys. The roof, the exterior shell, the electrical systems, the plumbing systems, ventilation, egress, parking lots, and the building is out of compliance in more ways than are imaginable with today's fire, building, and accessibility codes. Correcting the deficiencies in the existing building would cost over $100 million over several years, and that would be without any state aid. That would not be an MSBA-approved project. The magnitude of those repairs would trigger the obligation to bring the whole building up to code, every dimension. Okay, so I'll go through these quickly. These are just some of the current site conditions. You can see there's cracks, there's weeds and pavement. These are interior shots, exterior shots of the shell. There are leaks everywhere. The roof is 30 years old. It's been failing for a lot of years, and I can tell you I've actually been on that roof, and it really is held together with duct tape and plastic wrap and cement blocks. Some more shots of the roof. We've got, the current hardware, exit signs. It's just a mess. There are these kinds of retrofit construction conditions, these kinds of things where the ventilation is so bad in the building that once you install something like a computer, the air is moving so badly, you punch a hole in the cement blocks and stick a fan in there and plug it in somewhere. And retrofits like this. So these are some of the conditions that we're dealing with the building. It's just, and mind you, this is not the result of a failure to maintain the building. In fact, the MSBA was so pleased with the maintenance plan that we're likely to get extra points on reimbursement for having a good maintenance plan. Okay, so the school committee is about to implement this career academy model, which Carrie mentioned. And the notion here is that there's a synergy between the academic programs and the technical programs, and there's an integration of these things, and it's going to be a better educational experience for all the students. The current building was designed in the 60s. Carrie reminds me that the Peabody building was originally built in this open classroom design. It was really popular at the time, and it's pretty clear at this point that it was an educational failure. The current building design and the configuration, it doesn't support the current program, never mind the career academy model that the school committee is implementing. And the mechanical and electrical infrastructure does not support either the current program or what we hope the future programs will be. The existing building also, it separates the academic disciplines, it isolates the technical areas of the school from the academic programs, and it really can't accommodate the career academy model. And simply put, it can't, the existing building cannot deliver a 21st century education. So this is just briefly what this model is going to look like. There'll be a Life Sciences and Services Academy, an Engineering, Construction, and Trades Academy, and then a bunch of shared services. And you can see briefly in here what these programs will be in each of the academies, and the many things including health and safety, reading, et cetera, academic programs that will be shared between those two academies. Okay, so here's the situation with the accreditation. Over the years, we've been cited with multiple deficiencies. In December 2012, the school was placed on warning status solely due to the condition of the building. And the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, which is our accrediting agency, same one for all of our Concord schools, requires regular updates on how we're doing addressing the building issues. Okay, so the MSBA process. We've been through this a few times in Concord, so I think most of us are pretty familiar with it. It goes in modules. We've now finished modules 1 through 4. We started back in 2009. This project is the oldest project in the MSBA pipeline. We've taken longer than anybody else. Back in 2009, they authorized us to form a school building committee. We hired consultants. Our owner's project manager is Skanska. Our architect is Castle Booz. Our estimator is Daedalus. These are all great quality professionals giving us very good service on this project. MSBA in 2014 gave us a final extension on getting the project to them, June 30th, 2016, and 2015 we had all of the preliminary solution options and preliminary cost estimates all worked out. Design enrollment in there also in 2015 was set by the MSBA at 628 students, and they sent us a letter saying they wouldn't consider a school any smaller. Didn't make sense to them on an economy of scale. In spring of 2015, we had a bunch of public hearings in 15 of the 16-member towns. There was one town that wouldn't let anybody come. That town is, by the way, voted to withdraw. In June of 2015, the school building committee and the school committee recommended to the MSBA the new building option as its preferred solution, and at a cost not to exceed the $144.9 million. In July of 2015, the MSBA unanimously selected the new building as the preferred solution. We completed schematic design on the new building and did the cost estimates by the end of December. I will tell you that that was a charrette, because once the schematic design is done, the owner's project manager has to certify that the project is still within the budget guidelines. That required a whole bunch of value engineering, material substitutions. There was a program elimination and so forth to keep the project within budget, and there was success on that. The new building is about 240,000 square feet. So January 2016, the MSBA unanimously approved the new building schematic design with the cost not to exceed the $144.9 million. The MSBA estimates the state grant to be $44,139,213. Additional project points could increase us to $45,206,061 of state grant money, and the expected cost to the district then is plus or minus $100 million. And the source, by the way, of these numbers is the MSBA letter that we received January 27th, 2016. We're now in Module 5. That is local approval of funding. That needs to be completed by June 30th of 2016. That's a deadline given to us by the MSBA. Then, assuming we do approve as a district the funding, the modules that follow will be 6, 7, and 8. That's construction management, actual construction, and project completion. The expected completion is on or before September of 2020. Okay, so again, deadline for our approval is June 30th. The school committee has not yet voted, the Minuteman School Committee, to bond the project. It is expected that sometime in February, yes, still, sometime in February? After Boxborough's town meeting, sometime in February, the school committee will vote to approve, will take the vote to approve funding. That requires a 2/3 vote by the school committee. And then district towns, there are two alternative routes here. One is the district towns vote at their own town meetings by a majority vote to approve that vote by the district school committee, with or without debt exclusion and a ballot following. Some towns will do that, some will not. Concord will. The school committee does have an alternative here, which would be under Chapter 71, Section 16N, calling for a district-wide vote at the ballot. That would be a majority vote, district-wide, not looking town by town. That is an option for the school committee here, and I don't believe any decision has been made about whether to exercise that. And again, once the building is funded, then construction documents will be developed, a construction manager at risk will be selected, bids solicited, construction would begin likely in 2018 with completion in 2.75 years the project is expected to take. Now, a little bit about the proposed project. This is the existing site condition. And let's see, there's the existing building and the track, and somewhere through the middle here runs the town line between Lexington and Lincoln. The current building sits in Lexington. This is the proposed new building. It's a funny shape over there. The reason for that funny shape is to maximize the amount of building that you can have over there in the wetlands. So it's got to stay out of all the buffer zones. The building is entirely in Lincoln. Building it over there allows us to do the same thing that we did with CCHS, which is to construct the entire new building without disrupting the existing educational program. No swing space, no temporary space, and then as soon as it's built, we move into it and tear the old one down. Here is the lower level site plan, and I'm going to go through these quickly, but the color coding here has to do with the academies. The notion is that one academy is on one end of the building, the other academy is on the other, and the center of the building has the shared services. This is also a building that has access for a lot of members of the public. They have a restaurant, they have cosmetology where clients come in from the outside, and other kinds of people coming from the outside. So there's a separate entrance designed for the public to come in during the day and to achieve security for the students. So here's the main level, and there's an upper level that is smaller than the others. This is a side section of the building. This is a bird's eye view. That tall thing sticking up there is a fly space for a technical theater program. I think that's actually taller than it's currently designed to be. One of the things that got value engineered was that particular part of the building. It got shrunk down a little to the great joy of the immediate neighbors. Okay, this is a rendering of the front, some rendering of the interior spaces. This is say it again? Breakout space. Thank you. That's breakout space. This is an interior atrium. And this is a restaurant, and I believe that this would be the restaurant that's open to the public. Okay, so comparing Voc Tech education to regular education in terms of building a building. It's really expensive to build this kind of a building. It's really two schools in one. You've got to have all of the core academic stuff that you have in an ordinary high school, and then all of the technical stuff is additional. So you can see that the Chapter 74 square footage requirements, those are, Chapter 74 is the section that governs vocational and technical education, and those minimum square footages are in addition to what the MSBA already requires for academic spaces. Got a lot of safety and health requirements that exist with vocational education that you don't have necessarily with ordinary education. The equipment is very expensive, lifts in the automobile sections and so forth. And the infrastructure really needs, for this to be an effective educational program, for the programs offered to be effective, the infrastructure has to mirror what's current in industry and in business. So that's a costly endeavor. There have been several renovation projects at Voc Tech schools recently, but only 3 new construction projects. Essex Aggie cost $134.5 million. That construction began in 2012. Putnam was built for $124 million. That was finished in 2012, and Worcester Tech was done so long ago we don't have a number for that. So the sense is that in today's dollars, we're pretty much in line with those numbers, and we are in line with the square footage that the MSBA in 74, Chapter 74 requires. So even though if you look at the square foot cost of this building versus CCHS, it makes sense for a vocational school if you look at it against these others. Okay, so what's it going to cost Concord? Looking at this in a couple of different ways. A lot of this is in flux. As Tony mentioned earlier, our capital assessment varies with not only our own student population, but the student population of others, and how many of those may be out of district versus in district. And the membership at the moment is in flux. There are 7 towns that have put on their special town meeting ballots a question whether they should withdraw from the district, and we won't know until March 1st how many are in and how many are out. Okay, so this is the current membership. The towns in yellow are the towns that have put on their special town meeting warrants the question of whether they should withdraw from the district. You'll note that one of them is Lincoln, where the building is going to be built. And one of the changes to the regional agreement is to remove the current requirement that the school has to be built in one of the member communities' towns. So you can see that with the exception of Sudbury, the number of students that attend from each of the towns considering withdrawing is really not very large, so that collectively they would not work a huge impact in terms of their withdrawal. This chart was developed by the Minuteman Finance Department on behalf of the towns. It looks at 2020 assessments because that's the point at which the whole debt would be under debt service for construction of the building. We expect it to be finished by then. These assessments are a combination of capital and operating assessments. And this column looks at 9 towns, what our assessment would be, and this one looks at 16 towns. And if we find Concord here, it looks like we have, based again on our current enrollment of 17, and again, we know that that fluctuates, but assuming current enrollment, we would have about 6.34% of capital and operating expenses, and under the formula in the agreement, if there's 16 towns, we'd end up with a $590,000 assessment, and if there are only 9 towns, we would end up with a $628,000 rounding up assessment, and that's if all 7 of the towns considering were in fact to withdraw. Okay. This is a breakdown of our assessment at 16 members. Did we eliminate the required minimum contribution in the amendments? Is there still a required minimum contribution? It's still, okay, that's still there. All right. So at 60 members, we have a required minimum, transportation, operating assessment. Carrie, what's that? Oh, that's subtotal. All right, thank you very much. The debt capital number is $209,000 for a total assessment of $590. And then you see over here with 9 members, our subtotal is $400,000, and the debt would go from $209 to $226 for the $627. So this is our 4-year average of attendance, and our 4-year average is 10. So I guess actually our 4-year average was what was used to develop those numbers, and that would be 10. It was not 17. And that is what would happen under the amended agreement, is that a 4-year rolling average would be used to calculate assessments. Okay, so there's more information on the website. Every document you could hope to read is up there. You could spend a lot of hours there. Questions?
I have a couple. The 2 representative schools that were recently constructed, do we know the enrollment of those? Are they comparable to the 628, or are they different sizes?
I believe that Essex Aggie is somewhat smaller at less than 500 students. I don't know the other size, and I wonder, Carrie, do you know? Carrie's looking. When she finds it, she'll tell us.
Okay. And correct me, I could be wrong, because I've seen a variety of numbers at a variety of times for the MSBA reimbursement, but strikes me that's a lower percentage than I thought. I know it doesn't cover all the costs, but it strikes me as being a lower number than I've seen in the past. Am I?
You are exactly right. The base reimbursement rate is 40%, but that's of eligible costs. And we're now at a point in the estimating process where our OPM has, Skanska, has, I forget the name of this form, but they get this chart where you've got the MSBA makes you put all the numbers in this chart, and you got to figure out what's eligible and what's ineligible. So for example, they have a very unrealistic per square foot cost that they'll reimburse, and you get over that and you don't get reimbursed for that, even though you can't build for under that. So when you figure out those ineligible costs, the number goes down. The effective rate ends up being a little under 32% once you take out the ineligible costs. MSBA, it's been reported to us that MSBA is very sympathetic to this project and to this district, and they've really bent over backwards to where they had discretion about what was eligible, to consider things eligible where they had discretion. And they're also bending over backwards to encourage us and help us to get all the extra points that we can. And the available extra points include the maintenance plan, as I mentioned, getting the equivalent of LEED certification, and what's the other one? Owner's construction manager at risk.
Okay. And I'm assuming that in the 2020 numbers that we're now, under that scenario, assuming that we will have capital cost reimbursement for out-of-district, for the out-of-district students rolls into
yes.
that. That's one of the reasons that it helps keep that down. Okay.
Yes, and yes, and that's a fraught issue. We don't know what the formula will be, and we have heard rumors assess that fee.
Okay. And just one, maybe it's more appropriately directed at Tony, but on your back of your envelope, being included in this have any implication for the town's credit rating? Thank you. Anyone else have any?
Did I put you all to sleep?
Any questions from
questions?
the audience?
Okay.
Thank you very much. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Joan Ripczynski. Because different people have seen different pieces of the many things under consideration for Minuteman at special town meeting and town meeting, budget, whatever, I think it might be helpful to remind people that we're required by law to provide interested students with vocational education.
Thank you. That's a good point. Okay.
Anything else? Okay. Thank you very much. And finally, last boozer. I didn't mean that negatively. We saved the best for last.
Okay. How do I do this?
The arrow, yeah.
Just point? Right, okay. Booja Cookman, Chair of the Community Preservation Committee. Before I begin, I want to point you all to handouts that have a lot of the details. So there's our recommendations detailed here, plus all the projects CPC has funded over the years, and a little bit of a history of the CPC in Concord. So I'm not going to go into all of that in my presentation. So take a look at this. I am going to start with a little bit of context and history and try to hit on the highlights. But basically, over the years, CPC was enacted in Concord in 2005, so it's been 10 years, and we've raised over 15 million in revenues. Our state funding match has been approximately 30%, or 4.698 million, and almost 11 million for Concord, from Concord surcharge. The trend is that more and more towns are adopting and going for the CPA Act. So just for example, in fiscal year 07, the match from the state was $697,000, and in fiscal year 11, it was the lowest, which was $233,000. So it's dropping. There are 160 towns today in Massachusetts that have adopted CPC, or the CPA Act. So in terms of over those years, how the allocation has worked is that we have 23% we've funded in community housing. Historic preservation has been 36%, open space 15%, recreation 23%, which, by the way, was added. We learned recently from Stuart Saganor, who is in charge of CPC for the state, or CPA for the state, told us this is relatively newer, the recreation category, pushed actually by the town of Cambridge because they didn't have any open space, so they wanted something else to fund. So we've taken quite a lot of advantage of that. And then an open category of 1%, and administration 2%. By the way, we have to fund at least 10% every year in 3 categories: historic preservation, and affordable housing, and the open space. So let's take a look at this for a minute. So in 2012, we have about $118 per resident. This is based on the median tax bill. 216, about $146 per resident is going as it's a 1.5% surcharge that's going into the CPC fund per year. 50% of all towns in Massachusetts that have adopted CPC are at 3%, which is the maximum. We're at 1.5%. So I think it's want to show you some of the things that the town and you have been able to do with the funding that Concord's received over the years. So let's just take a look at the past. 68% of all the funds that CPC has spent have gone into town projects, 54 projects over the years, 32% to nonprofits, or 23 projects. So it's really wonderful that the town adopted this. When you look at how every year, all the time, we look around us and see what the CPC has been able to do. And so these are just some examples. In affordable housing, phases 1 and 2, this was 2009, 2010, 2015, the Peter Bulkley building. I don't know how many of you have seen it, been in it, but it's really fabulous. Other affordable housing projects that the CPC has been able to contribute to are illustrated here. Bedford Street Concord Housing Authority, 2006-2007, Lolly Woods, 2009, Emerson Annex, 2007, and the Walden Street Concord Housing Trust in 2008. The building we're in has much CPC funding has gone into the townhouse, the restoration, 2006, 2009, 2012, 2013. We even have a little sign downstairs, right? Really wonderful work, and this one actually came in under budget the last time, I believe. We have this beautiful painting here, restoration. CPC funds, Concord Art Association, Thoreau's Birth House, and the Neshotic Bridge restoration in 2008. So these are all projects that this funding has been able to support. The Robbins House, how many of you have seen the Robbins House? I mean, it's fabulous. And how many of you were here when it was moved down the street? That was quite a day. So once again, we're really lucky to have adopted this, and I think we ought to thank those who made this, who voted in 2005 at town meeting to put CPA on the map in Concord. Open space, Hubbard Brook Farm Field, 2007. Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, you'll hear about Sleepy Hollow a little bit again. Warner's Pond, this is a management plan so that the town can understand how to continue to manage this. It's a relatively shallow pond, correct? Needs to be updated. Warner's Pond Dam, the Rogers Land in 2011 and 2014. Lots around recreation, as many of you are aware. Doug White Playing Fields, this is from 2007. Whoops. And big chunk recently in recreation has been the CCHS, the Fields of Play, the renovations phase 1 and phase 2, 2014 and 2015. And Natural Playscape at Ripley. Have many of you been over to see that? Yeah, so that we've been funding that, what? Yeah, fairly consistently for a number of years. Okay, this year, the CPC, the committee, had a really difficult task. We had asks for $5 million in projects, and we had 1.481 to spend. It was a lot of deliberation, and I really want to stress and thank everybody from the town and from the applicants who worked with us to figure out how they could phase their project over multiple years, how they could get alternative sources of funding, and I think you'll see when I go through the actual projects how they managed to work with us to do that. So in turn, $1.2 million is going to be contributing to these projects in addition to the amount that the CPC has allocated. Okay, so we're going to move to 2016, where we're going at town meeting. This year, 29% of our funding is a state match. And locally, we raised about $1 million, and the state fund was $302,000. As I said, we had quite a few applications. This represents how many we are recommending be funded. So we had 3 in community housing, which represents 15% of the total. Historic preservation, we have 4 projects representing 28% of the total. Open space, 4 projects representing 16%. Recreation, 5 at 22%. Land acquisition, 17%. And administration, 2%. So we're now moving to what we're going to recommend for town meeting for this year. You'll notice as I go through these slides, the lower amount, the lower bar illustrates what we are recommending to fund, and then the upper bar is funding coming from other sources. And as I said, we were very, very pleased at how creative and helpful the applicants were able to be. So this is Town of Concord Regional Housing Services. And this will be $17,500 from the CPC, and the total is the $35,000 from Concord. We're one of 7 towns that participate in this regional housing services program, and the staff rotates between the towns, and they are incredibly helpful at the Affordable Housing Administration. So this is something we fund every year. The next item is the Affordable Housing Buy-Down Program. And this is one of the items that we try to keep a fund available, because there's several things like housing that can come up unplanned. And so it's important that there be enough funding to be able to take advantage of units that come on the market when they do. So we like to keep at least the amount to fund 1 unit, and we've allocated $120,000 this year as recommended for Affordable Housing Buy-Down Program. For example, a unit might come available in the Emerson Annex that we can then put into the town can have as a permanent affordable unit. Community Housing Fund Reserve for future community housing like Junction Village. We've put in reserve or $82,500. This project is from the Emerson umbrella. This is a historic preservation project. And once again, this is an example of a phased project. They actually asked for double the amount we're able to fund this year. And this is to restore, you can see over on the left, the windows are in really bad shape at the Emerson umbrella. They're doing a lot over there. They've raised a lot of money to do some really very great restoration of this building from 1929. They'll be coming back next year for more. They're hoping they can do 50 of the 100 windows. They're going to be double paned, insulated, with, I think, a much nicer appearance as well. So this is going to help on energy efficiency there, and hopefully continue to support that building that is a town-owned building. Sleepy Hollow Cemetery roadway and stone wall improvements. You can see the total amount of $724,500. We could not, they asked us for $400,000. We could not accommodate that with all the other projects. So they went back and found alternative sources as well. We're funding $225,000 this year, and we hope we have the funds to fund another phase next year when they come back again. So the project itself is to repair roadways, repair the wall, fix erosion damage, stormwater improvements, etc., for this for the cemetery, which dates from 1855. Okay, the next project is also on the historic preservation. This is the Wheeler Harrington House in West Concord. How many of you know this house? 1, 2, 3, only 3? It's a beautiful house. It's, oh, it's missing something in the image. But it's a 1745 farmhouse. It's one of the oldest farmhouses in West Concord. It's on, I was asking Marcia, we think it's maybe 13 acres, something like that. They came to us asking for quite a bit more funding than we could give them, so they've really just asked for the roof and masonry work to preserve the building as best we can going forward. So the applicant pared it back to what they deemed was absolutely critical for this house. Okay. The next project is the new church in West Concord. They, once again, this is an example of they came to us asking for the full amount, and we said we can't fund the full amount. We're now asking to fund $12,000 for this project. It is to repair and retrofit these steps to their original condition. This church was built in 1903, and everybody recognize it from West Concord. So we did ask the applicant to agree to allow the town or residents to have access to this building 2 to 4 times a year, and they've agreed to that, so that'll be one of the conditions in the We are being invaded by buckthorn. How many people know what buckthorn is? It's costing us a lot of money, and it's oh, we're missing the violets. I don't know, something happened to our images here. If this is the old calf pasture habitat. It has the largest population of Britain's violets. It is being invaded by buckthorn. We funded this for the last 3 years for invasive removal, and we have agreed to fund $36,000 for another 3 years of invasive removal to keep this as pristine as possible. Everybody knows where this is, right? Yes. Okay. You can go see the violets and the buckthorn on your own because I didn't show up on the slide. The next one is also a buckthorn situation. This is Gowing Swamp, and I showed you earlier how many projects we funded for the Ripley Children's Center. They are interested in, they're actually working with Sudbury Valley Trust to remove the invasives in Gowing Swamp, which adjoins Ripley, and they asked us this year to fund also a viewing station, which we couldn't do. And so once again, the decision in terms of priorities was to remove the invasives first, and then they'll probably be back next year asking for this part of this project. Where's Marcia? This is Marcia's favorite project, the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail phase. This is the final design phase, correct? So CPC, we're splitting this between open space and recreation. That's why you see the 2 colored bars down at the bottom. This is state is also, the Mass Department of Transportation helps to fund this. And this is for the 100% completion of the design plan. And this is critical. If this was not funded this year, there could be the potential that the state could withdraw their part of the funding. Okay, White Pond. How many people have heard about White Pond in the news this year? Okay, so take a look at this. So White Pond there's been a plan on the maintenance plan for White Pond. The funding is to actually implement that plan with erosion controls, with and other, I guess, water. I don't know, maintenance plan, Marcia help me, but it's erosion controls, and it's on the town land that's adjacent to the pond and to the state boat launch. So the town was hoping to get some matching funds from the state that did not come through, so we did agree to fully fund the request of the NRDC. This project it's the U.S. Concord Bell Memorial Restoration Project. This is the bell on the left. It's actually in the basement of this building. And it is being proposed by the Rotary Club of Concord. It is a project where they want to take the bell and prominently display it in town at this area right down here that has that old billboard. and redo that space to make it more attractive and highlight the bell, which was from the USS Concord, which was a ship that was decommissioned in the 1940s. So they're currently working on finalizing that plan, and we're waiting to have the final before we do our final recommendation, but that is on the list. Another recreation funding request is for the drinking water fountains for Concord playing fields, and this is for fountains to be installed at Alcott, Ripley, Sanborn, Thoreau, Willard, and South Meadow playing fields. Both water fountains and water bottle filling capacity will be accomplished by the water fountains, and the applicant, Concord on Tap, is working very closely with the town, so it's a joint project. So you can see how they were able to go back and get additional funds from other sources to complete this ask. And then we have, once again, recreation. This is phase 3 of the field renovation project, so $150,000. And the circled area is where there will be a new natural grass multi-purpose playing field. It's the final phase of Concord at Play, Concord Carlisle Play, and we will just be funding the playing field, natural grass playing field. Whoops. Okay. And then, Chris, will you have already gone over this by the time, or is this coming after? You did it at an earlier hearing. So you've heard a lot about this because Chris went over this in a lot of detail, I think, at an earlier hearing. So we have allocated $250,000. It's gone into for land acquisition to support this project. We actually voted on it at our last meeting, and this is going to be used to help the town acquire the 80-acre purchase of 265 Balls Hill Road, and many other this is a small part of that funding, but this is earmarked for that. And I think you've seen this if you've seen Chris's presentation. Okay, and then finally, staff technical support. We're recommending $30,000 to pay for all the amazing help we get from the planning division staff support, legal and technical and consulting services, and just all the support we get from town staff, for a total of $1.844 million. Any questions? Okay.
Any questions?
Wow.
Boy.
Oh well.
Almost.
Almost got you there.
Very quickie. Ann Hayden, 342 Sudbury Road. I was wondering if we were to go up from 1.5% to 3% for the amount of money that comes from, that's assessed to taxpayers.
Yes.
Does the money that we get from the state, does that double also, or is that a totally separate allocation process?
No, it doesn't. We would get more from the state, but it doesn't.
Did you
we
say
would get more, but it doesn't double. Once you, because Concord's median income is high, and because for a variety of ways that they've structured in the CPA Act, we would get additional funds, but it would not double.
Okay, great. Thank
they
you.
have a formula that they use. Yeah. Any other questions?
Bouja, thanks for all the work your committee has done. Quick question on Balls Hill Road. Did you have another $150,000 in the reserve?
We have money in a reserve fund from previous years, yes, that is, has been agreed to by the last, I don't think, Terry, you were at the last meeting.
Right, I was.
We voted to support the town manager and for that
So that's
parcel.
also, so you're
But that's not part of the 250 from this year.
Oh, right, because it's a previous year.
It's from a previous year.
Got it.
So that was already in the land acquisition fund.
Right.
And we would love to have more available in reserve funds for this very reason. So we're pretty much, we don't have anything really left in reserves at this point. Okay? Okay, now I have 3 more presentations, and you all ready? Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we will close the meeting. Thank you all for coming, and we will see everyone tomorrow night at the special town meeting.